Imagine being 7 years old alone in your room, when suddenly your belly starts to move, as if something is alive inside you. Terrified, you grab the phone and whisper into 911. My belly is moving. That single call would unravel a mystery so dark, so shocking, that it left doctors, police, and even federal agents speechless. This is the story of Emily, and what was discovered after a trip with her father. Before we dive into today's story, let me ask you something. Where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments below, because it's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now settle in, maybe grab a drink or find a comfortable place to sit, because this story is one that will stay with you long after it ends. It began on a warm summer evening in a quiet town in rural Tennessee, the kind of town where life moved at a slower rhythm and neighbors still waved when they passed each other on the road. The county's 911 dispatch center sat in an unassuming brick building, humming along in its usual rhythm. The night had been uneventful so far, just a few noise complaints, a minor traffic incident, and an elderly man who had accidentally locked himself out of his house. Nothing that broke the calm, steady pace of the operators on duty. But at exactly 7:42 p.m., a call came in that would shift everything. The phone line crackled, and on the other end was not the hurried, panicked voice of an adult, but something softer, more fragile. A child's whisper. "Hello, 911. The operator on duty that night was Evelyn Parker, a seasoned dispatcher with nearly 2 decades of experience. She had heard it all: angry drunks calling to vent, children dialing for fun, even life-or-death situations where every second counted. But something about this tiny voice made her instinctively sit up straighter in her chair. There was fear in it. Not the fake kind children sometimes used when playing games, but raw, trembling fear. "Yes, sweetheart, this is 911. I'm here to help you," Evelyn said gently, softening her voice to match the child's. "Can you tell me your name?" There was silence for a moment, broken only by the faint static of the line. Then came the reply, halting and unsure. "My name's Emily." "Hi, Emily. How old are you?" Evelyn asked, her fingers already flying over the keyboard to log the call. "I'm 7, the little voice answered. "Okay, Emily, thank you for being so brave and calling me. Can you tell me what's wrong?" And that's when Evelyn's blood ran cold. "My belly, it's moving," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "Something's moving inside me, and it hurts." The room suddenly felt heavier. Evelyn had dealt with all kinds of emergencies, but this was different. Children complained of stomachaches all the time, but the way Emily said it, the sheer terror in her voice, made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She knew instantly this wasn't an ordinary stomachache. "Emily, honey, I want you to stay calm," Evelyn said softly, keeping her own voice steady despite the urgency building inside her. "Where are you right now? Are you at home?" "Yes. I'm in my room. Daddy brought me back from a trip, but now he's sleeping. Mama's not here." That detail caught Evelyn's attention immediately. A trip. A father sleeping. A little girl, home alone, terrified. She quickly typed into her system to begin tracing the call. "Sweetheart, you're doing so well. Can you tell me what your house looks like, or maybe your street name?" Evelyn coaxed gently. There was a pause, and then Emily whispered, "It's the blue house with the porch, the one with the big tree in front. We just came back yesterday." The system pinged, and within seconds, Evelyn had a location. A small home on Willow Creek Road, on the outskirts of town. She dispatched Officer Daniel Harris, one of the county's most trusted deputies, to the address immediately. But even as she did, she knew she had to keep Emily talking. "Emily, I've sent a nice police officer to come and check on you. He's going to make sure you're safe, okay? Can you tell me more about what you're feeling in your tummy?" Emily's breathing grew shaky on the other end of the line. "It feels like something's moving around inside, like a bug, but bigger. Daddy said it's nothing, but it hurts so much. I don't like it." The words hit Evelyn hard. She glanced around at her fellow dispatchers, signaling them to stay quiet. Every instinct screamed that this was more than just a medical emergency. Children didn't describe pain like that unless something was very wrong. "You're doing so good, Emily," Evelyn soothed, her voice calm and warm. "I know it's scary, but you're not alone. I'm right here with you until help arrives. Can you tell me, did anything happen on your trip with Daddy? Did you eat something that made you feel funny?" For a moment, Evelyn thought the little girl wouldn't answer. Then, almost inaudibly, Emily whispered, "We went camping. Daddy gave me food and told me to be brave. But after that, my belly started to feel weird. It's been getting worse." Evelyn's heart clenched. Something about the way Emily said it, "Daddy told me to be brave," sounded off. It didn't sound like the usual reassurance a parent gave. It sounded rehearsed, like something Emily had been told to repeat. By now, Officer Harris was speeding down Willow Creek Road, his patrol car kicking up gravel. Evelyn kept Emily on the line, gently guiding her through her fear. She asked about her favorite toys, her favorite color, anything to keep her focused and talking until help arrived. And then, faintly through the phone, Evelyn heard it. A creaking noise. "Emily, are you still alone in the house?" she asked quickly, her heart rate spiking. "I think. Daddy's awake," Emily whispered, her voice now trembling harder. "I hear him walking." Evelyn's stomach dropped. She immediately radioed Officer Harris with an urgent update. Whatever was happening, it was no longer just a medical emergency. This little girl might be in immediate danger. Within minutes, Harris pulled into the driveway of the blue house with the big tree in front. The house looked quiet, almost too quiet, as if it were holding its breath. He stepped out of his car, hand resting on his holster, and made his way toward the porch. "Emily, honey," Evelyn whispered quickly into the phone. "The officer is there now. You might hear him knocking. Don't be scared, okay?" And sure enough, a knock echoed faintly through the line. Harris's firm voice followed. "Sheriff's Department. Emily, are you in there?" "It's okay, I'm here to help." On the other end of the phone, Evelyn heard Emily's tiny voice brighten just slightly. "He's here. The policeman's here." Relief washed through Evelyn, but only for a moment. Because deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Behind the closed door of that quiet blue house, a frightened little girl clutched her stomach, convinced something was moving inside her. A father had returned from a mysterious trip, now stirring awake. And a veteran officer was about to step into a situation that none of them could have imagined. As Harris waited for the door to open, Evelyn whispered one last thing to Emily. "You're so brave, sweetheart. Just hold on a little longer. Everything is about to change." And with that, the story that would shock not only the town but eventually people far beyond it had truly begun. The night air was thick with humidity as Officer Daniel Harris stood on the porch of the little blue house. The crickets chirped in the trees, the world outside calm and ordinary, but his instincts told him that what waited behind that door was anything but ordinary. He had answered countless calls in his years on the force, domestic disputes, burglaries, even violent assaults, but there was something different about this one. The tone of the dispatcher's voice when she radioed him, the urgency in her normally calm manner, had set him on edge before he even pulled into the driveway. And now, with his knuckles still warm from knocking, he waited in tense silence. From inside, there was movement, shuffling footsteps on wood floors, a pause, then the faint creak of a doorknob turning. Harris rested his hand lightly on his holster. He wasn't about to storm in unless the situation called for it, but he was ready for anything. The door opened just a crack, and through the narrow gap he saw a pair of wide, frightened eyes. "Emily?" he asked gently. The door opened wider, revealing a small girl in a pale pink nightgown, her hair a little tangled, her cheeks streaked with tears. She looked younger than 7, so tiny standing there in the doorway, clutching her stomach with one hand and the phone in the other. "You came," she whispered, relief in her trembling voice. "Yes, sweetheart, I did," Harris said, crouching slightly so he was closer to her eye level. "I'm Officer Harris. You can call me Daniel if you want. I heard you weren't feeling well. Can I come in and make sure you're okay?" Emily hesitated, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Daddy's inside, he's sleeping, but I think he woke up." That sent a ripple of unease through Harris. He kept his tone calm and reassuring. "That's okay. I just want to talk and make sure everything's all right. You did the right thing by calling for help." Finally, Emily stepped aside, opening the door just enough for him to enter. Harris stepped into the small living room, scanning the space as he did. The house was modest, clean but cluttered, with the faint smell of campfire smoke lingering in the air. A backpack sat slouched against the wall, half unzipped, with what looked like camping gear spilling out, flashlight, rope, an old thermos. On the coffee table lay a stack of papers and a few snack wrappers, as if someone had dropped them carelessly. Emily clutched his sleeve, tugging him gently. "It hurts, officer. My tummy keeps moving." Harris's heart clenched at the sight of her. There was no faking the way she winced, the way her small hand pressed into her abdomen, as if trying to hold something still inside. He knew immediately this wasn't a child's imagination. Something was very wrong. "Okay, Emily," he said softly. "We're going to get you some help. There's an ambulance already on its way. They'll take you to the hospital where doctors can look at your tummy and make it stop hurting." Her eyes welled up again. Promise? I promise, he said firmly. But I need you to tell me something. You said you just got back from a trip with your dad, right? She nodded, eyes darting again toward the hallway. Can you tell me where you went? Her voice was barely audible. We went camping by the lake. Daddy said it was just us, like an adventure. But he gave me something to eat. It tasted funny. After that, my belly started moving. Harris kept his expression steady, but inside his mind was racing. Something she ate. Something slipped into her food? He couldn't jump to conclusions, but the alarm bells were ringing loud in his head. And then, from the hallway, came the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. Emily's grip on his sleeve tightened like a vice. He's coming, she whispered. Harris shifted his stance, placing himself between the hallway and the little girl. Seconds later, a man appeared, a tall, broad-shouldered figure with disheveled hair and the look of someone who'd just woken from a heavy sleep. His eyes narrowed when he saw the officer standing there. What's going on? The man demanded, his voice groggy but edged with irritation. Mr. Thompson? Harris asked evenly. Yeah. Who are you? Officer Harris, Maplewood County Sheriff's Department. We got a 911 call from your daughter. She said she wasn't feeling well. The man rubbed a hand across his face, shaking his head. She called 911. For a stomachache? Jesus. He looked at Emily, his expression sharp. Emily, what did I tell you about making things up? The little girl shrank behind Harris, clutching tighter. That small gesture told Harris everything he needed to know. She was afraid of him. She didn't make anything up, Harris said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. She's in obvious pain, and EMS is on the way. We'll let the doctors decide what's going on. The father bristled, his jaw tightening. This is ridiculous. She just got an upset stomach from some camp food, that's all. She's always dramatic. Sir, Harris said, keeping his voice professional but stern, I need you to step back and let the medical team evaluate her when they arrive. Right now, her safety is my priority. For a tense moment, the father looked like he might argue further. His eyes flicked to the backpack by the wall, then back to Emily, and Harris caught it. That nervous glance wasn't the look of a man concerned for his daughter. It was the look of someone worried about what might be found. Before Harris could press further, the wail of an approaching ambulance broke the silence. Emily's eyes lit up with relief. They're here, she whispered. Moments later, the door opened again and two paramedics stepped inside, carrying their equipment. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes knelt down immediately beside Emily. Hi there, sweetheart. My name's Karen, and this is Jake. We're here to help you feel better. Can you tell me where it hurts? Emily pointed to her stomach. Here. It feels like something's moving. Karen's face softened, but Harris caught the flash of concern in her eyes. She'd heard the same words Evelyn and he had, and she understood the gravity of them. As the paramedics began examining Emily, Harris pulled the father aside. Where exactly did you take her camping? He asked. The man shifted uncomfortably. Just up by Lake Waverly. A little spot I know. Nothing special. Anyone else there with you? No. Just us. Look, officer, this is crazy. She ate some bad hot dogs, that's all. Harris studied him carefully. The man's story was thin, his manner defensive. Something wasn't adding up. But before he could push harder, Karen stood up. She needs to be transported immediately, she said firmly. Her abdomen's tender, and whatever's going on is beyond what we can handle here. Emily reached out a hand, grabbing Harris's again. Will you come too? Please. He crouched down, looking into her frightened eyes. I'll be right behind you the whole way. You're safe now. The paramedics lifted her gently onto a stretcher, her small frame looking even smaller under the straps. As they wheeled her toward the ambulance, Harris turned back to the father. Sir, I'd advise you to come to the hospital as well. The doctors may need information from you. But the man hesitated, his jaw tightening again. I'll come later. I've got things to take care of here. That was enough for Harris. He didn't push, yet, but he made a mental note. A father whose child was rushed to the hospital should have been out the door already, not hanging back with excuses. As the ambulance pulled away, sirens piercing the night, Harris stood on the porch of the little blue house, staring at the dark figure of the father silhouetted in the doorway. There was something in that man's eyes, a flicker of fear, maybe guilt, that made Harris's gut twist. He radioed dispatch as he climbed back into his car. This is Unit 4. Child is en route to Maplewood General with EMS. I'll follow. Flag this address for further investigation. Something's not right here. And as his cruiser pulled onto the dark country road, Harris couldn't shake the feeling that the real story, the one behind the little girl's whispered words, "My belly is moving," was only just beginning to unravel. The sirens cut through the humid night air as the ambulance sped down the winding back roads toward Maplewood General Hospital. Inside, the dim fluorescent lights flickered softly, casting long shadows across the narrow space. Emily lay strapped to the stretcher, her small body looking fragile against the stiff white sheets. Her hand, tiny and trembling, clutched tightly onto Officer Harris's fingers. He had kept his promise and ridden along in the back, his presence steady and grounding. Paramedic Karen worked methodically, her years of experience guiding her calm demeanor. She checked Emily's vitals, pulse slightly elevated, breathing shallow but steady. The child's abdomen was tender to the touch, and each time Karen pressed even lightly, Emily winced and whispered, "It's moving again." Those words sent a ripple of unease through the confined space each time she said them. "You're doing so well, sweetheart," Karen said gently, brushing a strand of hair away from Emily's face. "We'll be at the hospital very soon. The doctors there will have special tools to figure out exactly what's happening inside your tummy." Emily's eyes, wide and glossy with fear, darted between Karen and Officer Harris. "Will they make it stop?" "Yes," Karen reassured. "That's what doctors do. They find the problem and fix it. You're very brave, Emily." Harris gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "And I'll be right there the whole time. You're not alone." The rest of the ride was quiet except for the steady beeping of medical monitors and the faint wail of the siren outside. Harris's mind, however, was anything but quiet. He couldn't shake the image of the father standing stiffly in the doorway, unwilling to ride with his daughter, unwilling even to show the faintest trace of concern. Something about his demeanor screamed that he was hiding something. And if Emily's story about the camping trip was true, about the strange food, the sudden stomach pain, then Harris had more questions than answers. The ambulance finally pulled into the emergency bay of Maplewood General, a small but capable hospital that served the county. The bright lights of the ER spilled into the night as the double doors flew open. A team of nurses was already waiting, alerted by Karen's call ahead. 7-year-old female, abdominal pain, reports of internal movement sensation. Karen rattled off as the stretcher was rolled inside. Tenderness on palpation, vitals stable but trending high. Needs immediate evaluation. The nurses nodded quickly, wheeling Emily toward an examination room. Harris followed close behind, his boots echoing on the polished floor. The hospital smelled of antiseptic, that familiar sterile scent that always seemed to cling to emergency rooms. Monitors beeped, voices called out instructions, and the general hum of urgency filled the air. But amid it all, Emily's soft voice was the only thing Harris could focus on. "Don't leave me," she whispered as they pushed her stretcher down the hallway. "I won't," Harris promised. "I'll be right here." Inside the exam room, Dr. Emily White, a pediatrician with a calm presence and years of experience, introduced herself. She pulled up a stool beside the stretcher, her eyes kind and focused. "Hi, Emily," she said softly. "My name is Dr. White. I'm here to help you feel better. Can you show me where it hurts the most?" Emily pointed to her lower stomach, her small fingers pressing just above her hip bone. "Here. It feels like something's crawling inside. Sometimes it moves around." Dr. White's expression remained professional, but Harris saw the flicker of concern in her eyes. This wasn't the usual description of abdominal pain. "All right, sweetheart, thank you for telling me," Dr. White said. "I'm going to press very gently, and I want you to tell me if it hurts." As she began the examination, Emily winced and whimpered. "It's moving again." Dr. White nodded slowly, her mind clearly working through possibilities. She asked Karen and Jake, the paramedics, a few follow-up questions about the trip, the onset of symptoms, and Emily's vitals. Then she turned to Harris. "Were you with her father when this happened?" Harris shook his head. "No, I arrived after she called 911. She said her dad brought her back from a camping trip yesterday. He claims it's food-related, but his behavior was off. He didn't want to come here." Dr. White's jaw tightened slightly. "We'll keep that in mind. Right now, I want imaging as soon as possible. Ultrasound first, then CT if needed. And blood work." The nurses moved quickly, prepping Emily for tests. Harris stayed near her side, offering small reassurances while the team worked. When the ultrasound machine was wheeled in, Emily's eyes grew wide at the sight of it. "What's that?" she asked nervously. "It's like a magic camera," Dr. White explained with a gentle smile. "It takes pictures of the inside of your tummy, so we can see what's going on. It doesn't hurt at all, just feels a little cold." Emily nodded hesitantly, still gripping Harris's hand. The gel was applied, and the probe moved across her small abdomen. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the machine. Harris kept his eyes on Dr. White, watching her expression carefully. At first, she looked calm, almost routine. But then, slowly, her brow furrowed. She adjusted the probe, pressed a little deeper, and scanned again. Harris knew that look. He'd seen it in doctors before, the subtle shift when something unexpected appeared. "What do you see?" he asked quietly. Dr. White didn't answer immediately. Instead, she nodded to the nurse. "Record this section. Angle 2. Save images." Then she pulled back slightly, her lips pressed into a tight line. Emily looked up at her nervously. "Is it bad?" Dr. White softened her expression quickly. "We just need a few more pictures, sweetheart. You're doing so great." But Harris could feel the tension building. Whatever Dr. White was seeing, it wasn't normal. After several long minutes, she finally set the probe aside. "I want Dr. Brown to take a look at this as well," she said, her voice low but firm. Dr. Robert Brown was the hospital's chief pediatrician, a man with decades of experience. If she wanted his eyes on the scan, that meant something serious was in play. As the nurses cleaned the gel from Emily's stomach, Harris leaned closer. "Emily, you're being incredibly brave. I know it feels scary, but you're in the right place." She whispered back, "Will Mama come soon?" "Yes," Harris said. "The doctors will call her. She'll be here." Emily's eyes closed briefly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I didn't want to get in trouble. Daddy said not to tell." That sentence made Harris's chest tighten. Not to tell what? Before he could ask, Dr. White re-entered with Dr. Brown. The older man reviewed the ultrasound images, his experienced eyes scanning carefully. The two doctors exchanged a look, quiet but weighty. Harris caught the unspoken communication between them. They had found something unusual, and they weren't ready to say it aloud in front of Emily just yet. "Let's order a CT scan," Dr. Brown said after a long pause. "I want clearer imaging before we draw conclusions. But yes, there's something there. Something there." Harris's mind raced. As the team prepped Emily for the CT, Harris stepped aside with Dr. White. "You've seen something, haven't you?" She nodded, her voice low. "Yes. There appears to be a foreign object. It's not something that belongs in a child's abdomen. The imaging is still unclear, but it's not food, and it's not natural." Harris felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you saying someone put something inside her?" Dr. White didn't answer directly. "We need confirmation. But whatever it is, it explains her sensation of movement. This is not a typical medical case." Harris exhaled slowly, the weight of the revelation sinking in. If Emily's father had anything to do with this, then the situation was far darker than anyone imagined. As Emily was wheeled toward radiology, her small hand reached back, searching. Harris caught it, giving it a squeeze. "I'm right here," he said again, steady and sure. And though his voice was calm, inside he knew the truth. The mystery of what was inside Emily's tiny body was about to be revealed, and it would change everything, for her family, and for everyone in this quiet town. The waiting room of Maplewood General was bathed in the pale glow of fluorescent lights, the kind that made every sleepless eye look more tired, every anxious face more drawn. Officer Harris sat near the entrance, his elbows on his knees, watching the double doors with a tense patience. Emily had been wheeled into radiology for her CT scan, and now he was left with nothing but silence and the hum of vending machines. Then, just before midnight, the doors burst open. A woman rushed in, her face pale and her dark hair disheveled as though she had driven straight from bed without thinking to brush it. Her eyes darted wildly until they landed on Harris. She didn't hesitate, she went straight to him. "Where's my daughter?" she demanded, her voice sharp with fear. Harris rose, his presence calm, steady. "Ma'am, you must be Emily's mother?" "Yes. I'm Sarah." Her voice cracked on the name. "Where is she? Where's my baby?" Harris gestured gently toward the inner hallway. "She's with the doctors right now. They're running tests, but she's safe. She's been incredibly brave." Sarah's shoulders shook with relief and terror all at once. Tears welled up, but she swallowed them back, shaking her head as though forcing herself to stay strong. "I knew something was wrong. I knew it the moment she came back with him." Harris studied her carefully. "With her father?" Her eyes flashed. "Yes. Tom." The word came out bitter, as if it tasted foul in her mouth. She was supposed to be gone only a few days, but when he brought her back, she was pale, quiet, not like herself. "I asked him, but he said she was tired from camping. Then she went straight to her room, curled up and wouldn't eat. He brushed it off. He always brushes everything off. Harris felt the knot in his stomach tighten. Sarah, did Tom say what they did on this trip? Where they camped? What they ate? No, she said sharply, her voice trembling. He never tells me details. Just that he wanted father-daughter time. But something's wrong, I know it. She kept holding her stomach, wincing, and when I asked, he said it was probably a stomach bug. A bug. Her voice broke then, and she pressed a hand over her mouth. God, when she said that word, I thought she meant sick. But now, she sank into one of the hard waiting room chairs, covering her face with her hands. Harris sat beside her, giving her a moment before speaking. Sarah, I need to be honest with you. The doctors are seeing something unusual. Emily described feeling movement in her abdomen. The scans, they suggest there may be a foreign object inside her. Sarah's hands dropped, her eyes wide, glassy with horror. A foreign? You mean someone put something in her? We don't know for sure yet, Harris said carefully, though the weight of the truth pressed heavily in his chest. But the doctors are concerned. They'll know more after the CT scan. Sarah shot to her feet, pacing, her hands clutching her arms. No. She's just a child. She's 7. Who would do that? Why? Harris let her move, let her storm the small stretch of waiting room floor. Sometimes he knew panic needed motion. But inside, his own suspicions sharpened. Every instinct told him the father knew more than he had admitted. Moments later, Dr. White emerged from the hallway, her expression grave but composed. She walked straight to Sarah, placing a gentle hand on her arm. Mrs. Carson? Yes, I'm Sarah. Please tell me what's happening with Emily. Dr. White nodded toward a quieter corner of the waiting room, away from the scattered visitors and the hum of the vending machines. Harris followed them, sensing this was not news to be given in public earshot. The doctor's voice was low, careful. The CT scan confirms what we saw in the ultrasound. There is, in fact, something inside Emily's abdominal cavity that should not be there. Sarah gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. What is it? What did they do to her? Dr. White took a measured breath. We're still trying to identify it precisely. The object appears organic in shape, but it does not resemble anything we typically see, such as a swallowed toy or obstruction. It seems to be lodged within her intestinal tract, though not naturally. Harris felt the chill spread again across his skin. Sarah, meanwhile, shook her head violently, tears streaming now unchecked. No, this isn't real. My baby, she's 7. How could anyone? The doctor's hand tightened gently on her arm. Right now she is stable. That is the most important thing. We are preparing for further evaluation, possibly exploratory surgery, to determine exactly what this is and to remove it safely. But Mrs. Carson, Dr. White hesitated, her eyes searching Sarah's. I need to ask you some very difficult questions. Has Emily ever been in a situation where someone could have harmed her? Anyone she has been left alone with for extended periods of time? Sarah's breathing quickened. Her eyes darted to Harris, then back to the doctor. You mean Tom? Her voice was hard now, laced with fury. Don't you? You're asking if her own father did this. The doctor didn't confirm, but her silence said enough. Sarah let out a broken sound, half sob, half scream. I knew he was reckless, careless. But this? No. I never imagined. Harris spoke quietly, stepping closer. Sarah, did you notice anything unusual when Emily came back? Anything at all? Marks, bruises, changes in behavior? She wouldn't eat, Sarah said shakily, brushing at her tears. She just held her stomach, said it felt weird. And when I pressed her, she whispered that Daddy told her not to tell. I thought it was just about candy, or staying up late, something silly. I never dreamed. Her voice broke completely then, and Harris steadied her, a hand on her shoulder. Dr. White continued gently, Mrs. Carson, right now our priority is Emily's health. We will need your consent for the surgical team to intervene if necessary. We also may need to involve specialists, infectious disease, possibly law enforcement, depending on what we find. Sarah nodded furiously, tears dripping from her chin. Do whatever it takes. Take it out of her. Just save her. Harris's jaw tightened. The father's indifference earlier now burned in his memory, a silent alarm bell he could no longer ignore. As Sarah was guided to change into scrubs to join her daughter in pre-op, Harris stepped aside with Dr. White. You've never seen anything like this, have you? He asked. She shook her head slowly. No, and that terrifies me. Back in the prep room, Emily lay on a hospital bed, her tiny form dwarfed by the sterile equipment. When Sarah entered, Her daughter's eyes lit up with a faint, weary glow. "Mama!" she cried, reaching out her arms. Sarah rushed to her, gathering her close, careful of the wires and 4 tubes. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here. You're going to be okay." Emily clung to her, whispering against her shoulder, "It's still moving, Mama." Sarah's eyes filled again, but she held her daughter tightly, rocking gently as if she could shield her from everything. "Shh, sweetheart. They're going to fix it. They're going to make it stop." Harris stood in the doorway, watching the scene, his heart heavy. He knew the doctors would soon wheel Emily into surgery, that the truth of what was inside her small body would finally come to light. But he also knew this was no longer just a medical case. This was criminal. And the man who had brought Emily back from that mysterious trip, the man who now sat somewhere, silent, unbothered, was at the center of it. As the surgical team arrived to take Emily to the operating room, Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead over and over, whispering words of comfort. Harris stayed nearby, a silent sentinel, his mind already working ahead. The doctors might soon reveal the medical mystery, but it would be his job to uncover the darker truth, the why, the how, and the who. And in his gut, he already knew where the answers pointed. The sterile chill of the operating theater hummed with the quiet rhythm of machines, their beeping steady and indifferent to the human drama about to unfold. Overhead, the surgical lights glared down in stark white, illuminating the small figure lying on the table. Emily looked impossibly fragile in the sea of blue drapes, her skin pale against the stainless steel. Dr. White stood at the head of the surgical team, her gloved hands raised as the nurse tied her gown. Around her, 2 residents and an anesthesiologist moved with measured precision, preparing the instruments, calibrating the monitors, ensuring every step would be flawless. There was no margin for error tonight. In the viewing gallery above, Officer Harris stood beside Sarah, who wore surgical scrubs and a mask. She wasn't allowed in the operating room, but she had insisted on being as close as possible. Harris had seen mothers in crisis before, some frantic, some frozen, but Sarah was something else entirely. She stood rigid, her fists clenched, her eyes fixed on her daughter below with a burning intensity. He could see her lips moving behind the mask, whispering silent prayers. The anesthesiologist adjusted the mask over Emily's face. "Deep breaths, sweetheart," he murmured softly. "You'll just feel sleepy." Emily's eyes fluttered weakly toward the ceiling. "Will it stop moving?" she whispered, her voice muffled. Dr. White leaned down, her voice tender yet firm. "Yes, Emily. We're going to make it stop. You're very brave." The little girl gave the faintest nod before her lashes lowered and her body stilled, slipping under the anesthesia. The monitor beeped steadily, her tiny chest rising and falling in a mechanical rhythm. Dr. White straightened, her eyes narrowing with clinical focus. "Scalpel." The nurse placed the instrument into her waiting hand. The room fell into absolute silence except for the rhythmic machinery, the ventilator, the monitors, the soft rustle of gowns. With careful precision, Dr. White made the first incision, a clean line along the lower abdomen. Her hands moved with practiced steadiness, each movement deliberate, cautious. She had performed hundreds of procedures in her career, but never with the weight of such an unexplainable mystery pressing down on her. As she gently parted the layers of tissue, a faint tremor rippled through the exposed muscle. She froze. "Did you see that?" One of the residents whispered, eyes widening. Dr. White's gaze sharpened. She had seen it too. A subtle shudder, as though something deeper beneath the tissue had twitched on its own. "Retractor," she ordered calmly, though her pulse quickened. The nurse handed the tool, and Dr. White widened the incision, carefully exposing more of the abdominal cavity. What she saw made her draw in a sharp breath. Something was indeed moving. At first, it was faint, like the gentle roll of water under a thin sheet of ice. Then, as her hands worked deeper, it became undeniable. A shifting, writhing motion just beyond the intestinal wall. The resident's voice was hushed, trembling. "My God, it's alive." Sarah, watching from above, clutched the railing, her knuckles white. Harris felt a chill run through his veins. Even from the gallery he could see it, the unnatural ripple beneath the girl's flesh, as though something foreign was struggling against its prison. Dr. White steadied herself. Clamp. Suction. The tools clicked into her hands, and she carefully isolated the area. Her face was composed, but her eyes betrayed the weight of what she was seeing. With one more careful incision, the truth revealed itself. There, nestled against the loop of intestine, was a sac, translucent, glistening, pulsing faintly as though with a life of its own. Inside it, unmistakable, was movement. The shadowy outline of something curled, twitching. A collective gasp filled the operating room. What is that?" one resident whispered, stepping back as though distance might protect him from the horror. Dr. White's voice was steady, though lower, more urgent now. "It's some kind of implanted organism, contained in a cyst-like structure. This isn't a swallowed object. Someone put this here." Her words struck like a thunderclap. In the gallery, Sarah let out a strangled cry, muffled by her mask. She staggered back against the glass, her eyes wide with terror. Harris reached out instinctively, steadying her, though his own mind reeled. Implanted. The word echoed inside him like a bell tolling. Down below, the anesthesiologist kept his eyes glued to the monitor. "Vitals stable," he announced quickly, though his voice carried unease. "Stable for now." Dr. White leaned closer, examining the sac. It pulsed again, almost like a heartbeat, sending a ripple through Emily's tiny body. The doctor felt her stomach twist, but forced her hands to remain steady. "Scissors," she ordered. The nurse hesitated, then placed them in her hand. With delicate precision, Dr. White began to separate the sac from the surrounding tissue. Every cut had to be perfect. A slip could rupture the mass, and the consequences, unknown infection, toxic release, or worse, were unimaginable. The room was silent, the tension suffocating. Even the machines seemed louder, each beep and hiss amplified against the backdrop of human dread. At last, the sac was freed. Dr. White held it up gently with forceps, lifting it into the sterile light. The entire team leaned in, their eyes fixed on the translucent membrane. Inside, something writhed, a small, pale creature-like form, coiled and twitching. Its outline blurred by fluid, but undeniable in its presence. Sarah screamed from the gallery, collapsing to her knees. Harris caught her under the arms, holding her upright as her body shook. The resident whispered hoarsely, Is that some kind of parasite?" Dr. White didn't answer immediately. She stared at the thing, her mind racing, trying to fit this horror into the catalog of medical knowledge she had studied all her life. It looked almost like a larval form, something insect-like, segmented, though larger than anything that should exist inside a human body. Finally she spoke, her voice grave. "It's not natural. Not in any way I've ever seen. This was placed here deliberately. Implanted." Her words hung in the air like a death sentence. The nurse quickly placed the sac into a sealed specimen container, locking it tight. Even through the clear walls of the container, the creature shifted, pressing faintly against the membrane as though it sought escape. "Get this to pathology immediately," Dr. White ordered, her tone sharp, urgent. "An alert infectious disease. Full hazmat precautions." The nurse hurried out, clutching the container as though afraid it might break free. Dr. White turned back to Emily, her heart pounding. With the foreign organism removed, she now had to repair the delicate tissues, ensure no rupture or contamination remained. Every stitch was a prayer. Above, Sarah sobbed into Harris's chest, her words muffled and broken. What did he do to her? What did he let them do? Harris's jaw tightened. He didn't have the answer yet, but he knew one thing with bone-deep certainty. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't some freak infection. Someone had put that thing inside Emily, and every fiber of his being told him the father knew exactly what it was. Down below, the surgery continued, Dr. White's hands moving with controlled urgency. When at last she closed the final suture, she exhaled heavily, her shoulders sagging with relief. Emily's vitals remained stable. For now, the girl had been saved. But the nightmare was only beginning. As Emily was wheeled to recovery, Dr. White stripped off her gloves, her face pale beneath the mask. She looked up toward the gallery, locking eyes with Harris. Her gaze spoke volumes. "We need to talk. Immediately." And Harris knew then that this case had crossed into uncharted territory. Not just medical, not just criminal. Something larger, darker was unfolding. Sarah, trembling and broken, clutched Harris's arm. "Tell me the truth," she whispered hoarsely. "What did they put inside my baby?" Harris swallowed hard, his eyes fixed on the doors through which the specimen had been carried. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But I swear to you, we're going to find out." The night after the surgery, the hospital felt both quieter and heavier. Sarah sat at her daughter's bedside in the recovery ward, stroking Emily's hair as machines hummed softly around them. The little girl was sedated, her chest rising and falling peacefully for the first time in days. Yet even in rest, her small hand twitched occasionally, as though her body still remembered the torment it had endured. Sarah's thoughts refused to settle. The image of that writhing sack inside her daughter replayed over and over in her mind like a broken reel. How could something so unnatural have found its way into Emily's body? And more importantly, who had done it? Her heart screamed the answer she didn't want to believe: Michael. Her ex-husband had taken Emily on that weekend trip, just a short excursion, he'd said. Some father-daughter bonding time. Sarah hadn't argued. Despite their differences, she wanted Emily to have a relationship with her father. She had wanted to believe that Michael, flawed as he was, still loved his daughter deeply. But now, in the dim glow of the recovery ward, every detail of that trip took on a sinister light. Detective Harris arrived late that evening. He found Sarah sitting rigidly, staring at the monitor's glow as though afraid to look away from her daughter for even a second. When she noticed him, she straightened, her eyes red-rimmed but sharp with resolve. "You wanted to know about the trip," she said quietly, almost before he could greet her. "I'll tell you everything I know." Harris pulled a chair close, flipping open his small notebook. "Take your time. Start from the beginning." Sarah closed her eyes, summoning the memory. "It was supposed to be a simple trip," she began. "Michael said he wanted to take Emily upstate. There's a little lake he used to go to as a boy. He told me it would just be camping, fishing, making s'mores by the fire." Emily was so excited, she packed her stuffed bunny, her little fishing pole. She couldn't wait. Her voice cracked, and Harris let the silence stretch, giving her space. "The night they left," she continued, "I remember Michael being different. He was calmer than usual. Too calm, almost rehearsed. He hugged Emily tight, but when he looked at me, I don't know. There was something in his eyes. Something I couldn't place at the time." Harris scribbled notes, nodding. "Did he say exactly where they were going?" "Only that lake," Sarah replied. "He didn't give me an address, just said it was near Pine Hollow. I trusted him. I thought, what could happen on a camping trip?" Her hand shook as she brushed Emily's hair back. But when they came back 2 days later, she wasn't the same. Sarah's voice dropped lower, trembling. She looked tired. Too tired for just a weekend of fun. Her cheeks were pale, and she kept holding her stomach. I asked Michael what happened, and he brushed it off, said she ate too many marshmallows that had upset her stomach. But Emily didn't smile when she said goodbye. She just clung to me and whispered, "It feels funny inside, Mommy." The words pierced Harris like a blade. The timing was clear. Whatever had been done to Emily, it happened on that trip. "What about Michael?" Harris pressed gently. "Did you notice anything unusual about him when they returned?" Sarah nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing with remembered suspicion. "He smelled strange. Not like campfire smoke or the outdoors. It was chemical. Sharp, almost like disinfectant, but stronger. And his hands, they were raw red, like he'd been scrubbing them too hard." Harris's stomach tightened. A picture was beginning to form, and it wasn't the picture of a father teaching his daughter to fish. "Did Emily mention anything specific about the trip?" he asked. Sarah shook her head. She tried, but it didn't make sense. She said Daddy took her to see special friends. She said they were in a big room with bright lights, and she had to lie down while Daddy held her hand. She thought it was a game. Tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks. "But now I know. It wasn't a game. It was the moment they did this to her." Harris's pen stilled. Bright lights. A room. Special friends. It sounded less like a camping trip and more like some kind of lab, some clandestine operation. And if Michael had been complicit, then he was no longer just a negligent father. He was a co-conspirator in something far more sinister. Later that night, after Sarah had finally dozed off in the chair beside Emily, Harris stepped outside to make a call. The hallway was quiet, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the silence. He dialed dispatch. "I need a full background check on Michael Carter. Travel records, financial activity, known associates. And focus on the last 3 months. Any unusual deposits, any connection to labs, research facilities, anything." He hung up and leaned against the cold wall, his mind racing. He remembered Sarah's words, special friends. Could Michael have been working with someone? A group? The idea clawed at him. A father willingly handing his daughter over to strangers for what? Experimentation? Implantation? Harris had seen plenty of twisted crimes in his career, but this felt like it brushed up against something darker than ordinary human cruelty. This felt orchestrated. The next morning, when Emily stirred awake, she was groggy but responsive. Sarah leaned close, her voice gentle, urging her to remember. "Sweetheart, do you remember your trip with Daddy? Can you tell Mommy what happened?" Emily's small eyes blinked slowly. Her voice was hoarse but clear. "We went camping, but not all the time. Daddy said I was special. He said some people wanted to meet me. We drove a long time, then went inside a big place. It was really cold. They put stickers on me, and Daddy held my hand. He said it wouldn't hurt, just tickle. But then, I felt sleepy. And when I woke up, my belly hurt. Sarah's tears spilled freely, but she kept her voice steady for her daughter. Did Daddy say who those people were? Emily thought for a moment. He called them helpers. They wore masks. They talked funny like robots. Harris, standing quietly in the doorway, felt the hair on his arms rise. Masks. A cold facility. Robotic voices. This wasn't the fantasy of a child. These were the fragmented memories of a procedure. That evening, Harris received a call from dispatch. Michael Carter's background check had turned up something disturbing. 3 months ago, Michael had received a series of unexplained deposits, large sums funneled through offshore accounts. Shortly after, he'd begun making frequent trips to a private facility registered under a shell corporation, conveniently located not far from Pine Hollow. The facility's listed purpose? Biological research. Harris's jaw tightened. The pieces were aligning. Michael hadn't taken Emily on a camping trip. He had delivered her to them, whoever they were, and worse, he had been paid to do it. Sarah nearly collapsed when Harris told her. No, she whispered, shaking her head violently. He wouldn't. He couldn't do that to his own daughter. But even as she spoke, her eyes betrayed her. Deep down, she had always feared Michael's moral compass was broken. She just never imagined he could sink this low. Harris placed a steady hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry, Sarah, but the evidence points to him. He wasn't just careless. He was part of this. And until we find him, Emily isn't safe. Sarah's sobs echoed down the sterile hospital hallway. But Harris didn't flinch. His resolve only hardened. Somewhere out there, Michael Carter was hiding. And with him, the key to unraveling this nightmare. That night, as Emily slept peacefully for the first time since her ordeal, Harris stood by the window, staring out into the darkness. His reflection in the glass looked older, wearier than he remembered. This case wasn't just about one little girl anymore. It was about uncovering a network, a purpose behind the unimaginable. Emily's body had been used, implanted, altered, and if they had done this to her, Harris feared she might not be the only one. The investigation had shifted. It was no longer just about saving Emily. It was about exposing whoever, or whatever was behind this. And it all began with finding Michael Carter. The morning after Emily recounted her fragmented memories of the helpers in masks and the cold room, Detective Harris returned to the precinct with a folder tucked under his arm. He had barely slept. His mind churned with possibilities, every new detail pointing toward something bigger and darker than a single father's betrayal. He spread the papers across his desk, the fluorescent light above flickering as though reluctant to illuminate the truth. Bank records, travel logs, property deeds hidden behind layers of shell companies. Michael Carter wasn't just a struggling father with financial problems. He was a man living a double life, one that connected him to people far more dangerous than anyone in this small town could imagine. Harris leaned back in his chair, staring at the photo of Emily clipped to the file. Her small face, captured before this nightmare began, radiated innocence. She deserved answers. She deserved justice. And Harris knew he was running against time. The first lead came from the property records. The supposed research facility, near Pine Hollow, wasn't listed under any reputable organization. It was owned by a corporation called Virilia Biotech, a name that rang hollow in every database Harris checked. No website, no staff directory, no research publications. It existed only on paper, propped up by a maze of offshore accounts. But there was one thread, a supply shipment. 2 weeks before Emily's trip, a delivery truck registered to a logistics company in New Jersey had delivered medical-grade equipment to the facility, anesthesia machines, sterile surgical tools, and refrigeration units. Whoever these people were, they weren't out in the woods for camping. They were running operations that required hospital-level precision, and Michael Carter had walked his daughter straight into it. Harris pushed the files aside and pulled out his phone. He dialed Special Agent Whitaker, an old contact in the federal field office. Whitaker's gravelly voice came on the line after a few rings. Harris, been a while. What's on your plate? I need a favor, Harris said, lowering his voice even though his office door was shut. I've got a kid who was implanted with something. Doctors pulled it out. Still waiting on lab results, but the story behind it doesn't add up. Her father took her to a supposed camping trip, but evidence points to a private facility under a shell company. You ever hear of Virilia Biotech? There was a pause. Then Whitaker sighed. You've got to be kidding me. You know it? Not much. The names floated in a couple of classified circles. Whispers about unauthorized trials, black site research. Nothing concrete. Always scrubbed before we can dig too deep. Harris, if your case touches Virelia, you're in dangerous territory. Dangerous how? The kind of dangerous where people vanish. The kind where files get sealed and agents get reassigned to Alaska. Harris's grip on the phone tightened. Well, I've got a little girl who almost didn't make it. And I've got a father who sold her out. I don't care how dangerous it is. I'm not letting this go. Whitaker sighed again, but there was respect in his tone. I'll run what I can off the record. But watch your back, Harris. Virelia isn't just a company. It's a shield for something bigger. Later that day, Harris returned to the hospital. Sarah sat by Emily's bed, her face pale but steadier now that her daughter was awake and talking again. Emily clutched her stuffed bunny, tracing its worn ears with small fingers, grounding herself in something familiar. Detective? Sarah asked quietly when she saw him. Any news? Harris hesitated. He didn't want to scare her further, but she deserved the truth. We've confirmed Michael took Emily to a facility, not a campsite. The people there, they weren't just strangers. They're part of an organization, something hidden. And Michael, he knew exactly what he was doing. Sarah's face crumpled, her hand flying to her mouth. No. Please no. He loved her. I don't doubt he loved her once, Harris said gently. But people make choices, and his choice put Emily in their hands. Emily's soft voice broke the silence. Daddy said the helpers wanted to make me special. He said it was okay. The words stabbed through Sarah like glass. Harris knelt beside the bed, meeting Emily's wide, uncertain eyes. Sweetheart, can you tell me more about the helpers? Anything you remember? Emily frowned in concentration. They wore white coats. And masks. One had glasses under the mask. They didn't talk nice. They talked fast, like reading books. Daddy said I had to be brave. Did you see anyone else there? Other kids? Harris asked gently. Emily shook her head. Just me. But I heard crying. From another room. Sarah gasped. Harris's blood ran cold. Another child. This wasn't just about Emily. She might be one of many. That night, Harris pulled up aerial satellite images of the Pine Hollow area. The supposed facility looked deceptively ordinary from above. A cluster of concrete buildings hidden among dense trees, surrounded by a chain-link fence. No signs, no driveways, just a cleared patch with utility lines feeding into it. But the chilling detail was the outbuildings. 3 smaller structures branching off from the main one, their roofs discolored in a way that suggested heavy use. Storage? Quarantine? Or something far worse? He printed the images and pinned them to his office board. Next to them, he pinned Michael Carter's photo. A man smiling awkwardly in a family portrait, holding Emily on his shoulders before everything shattered. This isn't just a case anymore, Harris muttered to himself. This is a map of hell. The following day, lab results finally came in on the organism removed from Emily. Harris met Dr. Patel in a quiet conference room, Sarah waiting anxiously by his side. The doctor set a folder on the table, her expression grim. It wasn't a parasite, she began. Not in the natural sense. It was engineered. The tissue samples showed genetic modifications inconsistent with anything found in the wild. Someone designed it to survive inside a host. Sarah's face drained of color. You mean they put a man-made thing inside my daughter? Dr. Patel nodded solemnly. Yes. And the most disturbing part, there were early signs of integration. If we hadn't removed it when we did, her body would have adapted. It could have become permanent. Harris clenched his fists. Engineered. Integrated. This wasn't reckless cruelty. This was calculated experimentation. He turned to Sarah. This wasn't random. They chose Emily. And Michael delivered her because he was part of it. That night, Harris drove back to Pine Hollow, parking far from the facility's access road. The woods were thick, the air damp with the smell of pine and soil. Through binoculars, he studied the fence line. Faint lights glowed from within, the hum of generators carrying across the night air. For a moment, he thought he saw movement near one of the outbuildings, a figure in a white coat, stepping into the shadows. His gut twisted. Somewhere beyond that fence, children could be trapped. But he couldn't storm the place alone. He needed proof. Evidence strong enough to force federal intervention. And to get that, he'd need to track Michael down. Because Michael wasn't just a missing father. He was the link between Emily and the faceless people in those outbuildings. Back at his car, Harris received another call from Whitaker. I dug into Virelia, the agent said in a low voice. It's bad, Harris. They've got connections overseas, Hong Kong, Zurich, Moscow. Always moving money, always shifting names. And listen, 2 years ago, there was a case in Nevada. A child hospitalized with symptoms almost identical to your girl's. The report vanished. Sealed. I only found scraps. Harris's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. So Emily wasn't the first. No, Whitaker said grimly. And if you don't shut this down, she won't be the last. Harris ended the call and sat in silence, the night pressing in around him. His breath fogged against the windshield, his pulse hammering. This wasn't a local case anymore. It wasn't even national. It was global. Children being used as hosts for something engineered, something that could alter the very fabric of life. And right now, the only evidence tying it all together was a terrified little girl and a father on the run. Harris made a vow right there, under the looming trees and the hum of generators in the distance. He would find Michael Carter. He would expose Virelia. And he would burn their secrets into the light of day, no matter the cost. Because if he didn't, Emily's nightmare would spread far beyond one hospital bed. The rain hammered the city in sheets the night Harris finally got the call he'd been waiting for. He was at his desk, eyes burning from hours of staring at grainy surveillance photos of the Pine Hollow facility, when his phone buzzed with an encrypted number. He answered immediately. It's Whitaker, the voice rasped. We've cracked it. You need to hear this. Harris sat up straighter. His pulse spiked. Tell me. Your girl, Emily, she was implanted with what we're calling a neurogenic symbiote. It isn't a parasite in the traditional sense. It's a bioengineered organism designed to interface with human neural tissue. Harris's throat went dry. You're saying it connects to the brain? Yes. Think of it like a living device. The organism was built to grow tendrils that seek out nerve clusters, embedding itself along the spinal column. Once integrated, it can transmit and receive signals. Essentially, it turns the host into a biological relay, half child, half machine. Harris gripped the receiver, so hard his knuckles turned white. His mind flashed back to Emily whispering, My belly is moving. She hadn't been imagining things. Something had been alive inside her, curling and seeking, preparing to rewrite who she was. And it doesn't stop there, Whitaker continued, his tone grave. If the symbiote matures, it begins producing enzymes, altering the host's brain chemistry, enhancing memory retention, motor reflexes, even emotional regulation. But at a cost. It slowly erases free will. The host becomes more programmable. Harris felt bile rise in his throat. You're telling me they were trying to control children? Not just control them, Whitaker said. Weaponize them. Imagine soldiers who don't question orders. Operatives who can't break under interrogation. Kids turned into conduits for remote influence. Harris, Virelia isn't doing medical research. They're building biological puppets. The room seemed to tilt. Harris closed his eyes, steadying himself against the tide of horror. This wasn't just abuse. It wasn't even just experimentation. It was the deliberate construction of a new kind of human, a human owned from the inside out. When Harris returned to the hospital to deliver the news, Sarah was waiting in the hallway. She had dark circles under her eyes, but her back was straight, her chin lifted. She had been bracing for answers, no matter how terrible. Detective, she said, her voice tight. Please, just tell me the truth. Harris glanced toward Emily's room, where the little girl was coloring quietly, blissfully unaware of the storm circling her life. He lowered his voice. The thing inside her, it wasn't natural. It was designed to connect to her nervous system. If it had stayed in longer, it could have changed her. Sarah's hands trembled. Changed her how? Harris swallowed hard. It would have made her easier to control, to manipulate. She wouldn't have been herself anymore. Not completely. For a moment, Sarah said nothing. Then, slowly, tears filled her eyes. She pressed her hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. He gave her to them. Her own father, he handed her over like she was a project, not his daughter. Harris placed a steady hand on her shoulder. I know it's unbearable, but the good news is we caught it early. She's free of it. She's still Emily. Sarah's tears spilled over, but she nodded, clinging to that single sliver of hope. But Harris knew the bigger truth. Emily might be safe, but others weren't. He couldn't shake the memory of her whisper. I heard crying. From another room. If there were other children, other test subjects, then time was running out. 2 days later, Whitaker arranged a clandestine meeting. Harris drove out to an abandoned rest stop on the interstate, where a single black SUV waited under the flickering sodium lights. Inside, Whitaker spread documents across the hood, shielding them from the rain with his trench coat. "This is bigger than I feared," Whitaker said. "We've traced Virelia's funding. They're backed by a consortium of private investors, ex-military contractors, foreign tech firms, even pharmaceutical giants. They've been funneling money into projects labeled cognitive enhancement and neural resilience." Harris scanned the documents, his stomach twisting. Names, dollar amounts, dates, a web of corruption that stretched across continents. "And Michael Carter?" Harris asked. Whitaker tapped one sheet. "He's not just a desperate father. He's on their payroll. A recruiter. His job was to identify viable subjects, children with certain genetic markers. Emily wasn't his first delivery." The words hit Harris like a punch to the chest. "You mean, he's done this before?" Whitaker nodded grimly. "At least 3 other children in the past year. Different states. Parents who thought they were sending their kids on bonding trips. None of those kids came back." The rain hissed against the asphalt, a terrible silence stretching between them. Harris's jaw clenched so tight it ached. Emily had been hours from joining that list. "Then we find him," Harris growled. "And we find those kids." That night, back at the precinct, Harris stared at the evidence board. Michael's smiling face from the family portrait seemed to mock him now, pinned beside the aerial photos of the facility. Strings of red thread connected names and numbers, but the center of it all was Michael Carter. Who was he really? What had he promised these people? What could make a man sell his own daughter? Harris thought of Emily's words again. "Daddy said they wanted to make me special." Michael hadn't seen it as betrayal. In his mind, he was elevating her, offering her to something greater. That twisted justification made him all the more dangerous. The next breakthrough came from Emily herself. One evening, as Sarah read to her, Harris stopped by to check in. Emily looked up from her coloring and said something that froze him in his tracks. "Detective, do you know about the songs?" Harris crouched down. "Songs? What songs, sweetheart?" Emily tapped her temple. "The helpers, they played music. Not with instruments. In my head. Like buzzing songs. They said it would help me listen better." Sarah's face went pale. Harris's heart pounded. "Emily, can you hum it? Just a little." Emily hesitated, then hummed a strange, stilted tune, monotone, rhythmic, unnatural. Harris recorded it on his phone. Later, he played it for Whitaker, who immediately stiffened. "That's not a song. That's a neural entrainment pattern. They were conditioning her brain, Harris. Teaching her to synchronize with the implant." Harris's stomach dropped. The symbiote wasn't just biological, it was programmed. A hybrid of flesh and signal. A child's mind turned into a receiver for control. With that revelation, the full scope crystallized. This wasn't medical enhancement. This wasn't about curing diseases or boosting intelligence. It was about obedience. The shocking truth wasn't the implant itself, it was the agenda behind it. A future where human autonomy could be rewritten at will, starting with the most vulnerable. And Michael Carter, once a father, was now a recruiter for the architects of that future. Harris drove home that night with the weight of it crushing his chest. The rain blurred the road, headlights slicing through the darkness. In his mind, he saw Emily's face, innocent, fragile, yet unknowingly on the front line of something monstrous. He saw Sarah's tears, the betrayal etched in every sob. And behind them, in the shadows, he saw Michael's smirk, the smirk of a man who believed he was part of history in the making. Harris gripped the wheel tighter. No more shadows. No more whispers. The truth was out now, searing, undeniable. And if Emily's life had been the test case, then the world was the next target. The storm had broken overnight, leaving the city washed clean in pale morning light, but for Harris there was no sense of renewal. He hadn't slept. His desk was littered with empty coffee cups, files spread like battlefield maps. Every lead, every tip had been followed, and at last, one thread had unraveled the final knot. A warehouse near the riverfront, registered to a shell company traced back to Virelia. Michael Carter had been seen there, in the company of men whose names appeared on Whitaker's classified documents. Harris stood before the map tacked to the board, tracing the streets in his mind. He could feel it, every instinct told him this was it. The place where the father who betrayed his daughter would be found. By the time the task force rolled out, the sun was low, casting long shadows across the city. Unmarked SUVs crept into position, black vests and rifles ready. The air crackled with anticipation, the kind that came before a door was kicked in, before the thin wall between law and lawlessness splintered. Harris climbed out of the lead vehicle, the warehouse looming ahead like a slumbering beast of iron and glass. He turned to the team. This man is dangerous, not because of a gun in his hand, but because of the network behind him. Carter is connected. He's a recruiter, a facilitator. If we bring him down, we don't just save Emily, we tear open the heart of something bigger. The men and women nodded, faces grim beneath their helmets. As they approached, Harris's mind replayed Sarah's tear-choked words, Emily's humming of the strange mechanical songs. He wasn't just carrying a badge tonight, he was carrying the weight of every child stolen into this nightmare. The entry was swift and violent. The battering ram crashed against the warehouse doors, and the air filled with shouts of police. "Get down!" as boots thundered across the concrete floor. Inside, the cavernous space was a hive of illicit activity, computers, lab equipment, crates marked with shipping codes. Figures scattered like rats in the light, but the team moved with precision, corralling them, weapons raised. And then Harris saw him. Michael Carter stood near the back, half shrouded in the shadows of a steel staircase. He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He stood calm, composed, his hands raised slightly in mock surrender. His lips curled into a faint smile when his eyes met Harris's. "Well," Michael said smoothly as the officers fanned out, "I was wondering when you'd come knocking." Harris's blood boiled at the sight of that smirk. He strode forward, shoving past crates, his voice a growl. "Hands where I can see them, Carter. Now." Michael obeyed lazily, as though indulging a guest at his party. "You found me quicker than I expected. I suppose your little informant, Whitaker, was it? Still has a few tricks left in him." "Don't you dare say his name," Harris snapped, stepping closer. "You handed your daughter over to be turned into a lab rat. You let them cut into her, put something inside her. And you stand there smirking?" Michael's smile widened. "You think in such small terms, detective. Lab rat, betrayal, fatherly love. Those are the words of someone who can't see the horizon. What happened to Emily wasn't cruelty. It was opportunity." Harris's fists clenched at his sides. "Opportunity? She's 8 years old." "She's the future," Michael countered, his voice taking on an almost fervent tone. "Do you have any idea what they're building? A new species, Harris. Children who can process information faster than any machine, who can adapt, survive, obey. No fear, no hesitation. The perfect generation. And Emily," his eyes glinted with something like pride. "She was chosen. She would have been part of history." Harris took a step closer, until only a few feet separated them. "You don't sound like a father. You sound like a salesman." Michael's smirk faltered for the first time, replaced by a flash of irritation. "You can't understand. You still believe in the illusion of choice, of individuality. But choice is chaos. It makes people weak. Emily could have been strong. I gave her that chance." "You sold her," Harris hissed. "And you've sold others. We know about the other children. Where are they?" For the briefest moment, Michael's eyes flickered. Then the mask returned, calm and cold. "They're beyond your reach." Harris surged forward, shoving him against the staircase railing, fury pulsing in his veins. "Where are they?" The officers moved as if to pull Harris back, but he raised a hand, never taking his eyes off Michael. He could feel the man's steady heartbeat through the fabric of his shirt, unbothered, almost taunting. "You'll never shut this down," Michael whispered, so low only Harris could hear. "You cut off one head, 2 more grow in its place. Virelia is everywhere. You can't stop the tide." Harris's jaw clenched. He wanted to hit him, to shake the answers loose. But he forced himself to pull back, breathing hard. "Maybe I can't stop the tide," he said, voice shaking with controlled rage. "But I can damn well drown you in it." Michael was cuffed and led outside, his expression still maddeningly serene. But even as he was shoved into the back of a squad car, Harris knew this wasn't over. Michael was too calm, too confident. He was hiding something. Back inside the warehouse, technicians began cataloging the equipment. Harris scanned the rows of computers, the sealed crates, the strange biological containment units glowing with faint blue light. One of the officers approached with a laptop. "Detective, you'll want to see this." On the screen was a series of files, each marked with a child's name and a string of numbers. Medical scans, neural readouts, notes in clinical language about implant integration and cognitive alignment. Harris's stomach churned as he scrolled. Dozens of files, dozens of children, and then he froze. One of the names jumped out at him, Emily Carter. Her file was longer than the others, marked with special annotations. High compatibility, rapid adaptation, Prime candidate for Phase 2. Harris slammed the laptop shut, his hands trembling. Emily hadn't just been another test subject. She had been the subject, the one they believed would carry the project forward. Later, in the interrogation room, Michael sat across from Harris, shackled but relaxed, as though he were the one in control. The one-way glass reflected the overhead light, casting half his face in shadow. "You're wasting your time," Michael said softly. "You think locking me up will change anything? Virilia will move on without me. The work continues." Harris leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. "You're going to tell me where the other kids are? Every last one." Michael tilted his head, studying Harris like a specimen under glass. Then, with a faint chuckle, he said, "What makes you think I know?" "Because you recruited them," Harris shot back. "Because you delivered them. And because somewhere inside that twisted mind of yours, you keep score. You want credit for your part in this. So tell me where they are, before more of them end up like Emily." For a moment, Michael was silent, his eyes narrowing. Then he leaned forward, voice a conspiratorial whisper. "What if I told you they're not prisoners? What if they're willing? Children unburdened by fear, by doubt. They're becoming more than you can imagine." Harris's stomach churned. "They're children. They don't know what they're agreeing to." Michael's smile returned, slow and poisonous. "Doesn't matter. They're already gone, detective. And if you want to find them," his eyes glinted with cruel amusement, "you'll have to follow the music." The words hung in the air, cryptic and chilling. Harris's mind raced back to Emily's humming, the mechanical songs designed to rewire her brain. Music wasn't just a metaphor. It was a trail. Michael leaned back in his chair, satisfied, as if he had delivered a gift. "You'll chase the notes, Harris. And when you do, you'll see. This isn't the end. It's the overture." That night, Harris drove home with the words echoing in his head, "Follow the music." The city lights blurred past, but his mind was elsewhere, on the children whose names filled those files, on Emily's innocent humming, on Michael's chilling confidence. He gripped the wheel tighter. The confrontation had ended, but the war had only just begun. Michael Carter might be behind bars, but his shadow stretched far beyond the cell. And somewhere, out there in the darkness, the music was still playing. The words clung to Harris's mind like a burr. Follow the music. They weren't just a taunt. Michael Carter wasn't the type to waste words. Every phrase was calculated, every metaphor sharpened into a weapon. As the days passed after the raid, Harris found himself drawn back again and again to Emily's strange humming, those haunting mechanical tones she had carried back from her trip with her father. He played the recordings the doctors had made of her humming in the hospital, looping them over and over in the stillness of his office. At first, they sounded random, childlike fragments of melody. But beneath them lay a structure, repeating patterns, rising and falling in precise intervals. It wasn't music in the traditional sense, it was code. Late one night, hunched over his desk with tired eyes and too much coffee, Harris fed the audio into a program the tech division used to decode encrypted signals. The computer translated the notes into waveforms, then into data points. The screen lit up with coordinates. Harris leaned back in his chair, his breath catching. Michael had been telling the truth in his own twisted way. The music was a map. The location pointed to an abandoned concert hall on the outskirts of the city, long shuttered and left to decay. It was a place once filled with symphonies, now silent but for the rustle of wind through broken glass. Harris felt a chill. Of course they would choose such a place. What better hiding spot for their choir of altered children than a hall built for music itself? The following evening, Harris stood outside the hall with a small team, trusted agents only, people who understood what was at stake. The sun had bled away into night, leaving the structure looming like a tombstone against the sky. Ivy crawled over its cracked facade, and its great wooden doors sagged on their hinges. "Quiet entry," Harris whispered, his voice low. "No mistakes. We don't know what's inside." They slipped into the shadows, weapons raised, every step echoing faintly in the cavernous darkness. The air inside was thick with dust, but beneath it, Harris froze. He heard it, a faint, melodic sound drifting through the gloom. It wasn't played by instruments but carried by voices. High, delicate, and inhumanly precise. Children's voices. The team followed the sound, weaving through the bowels of the building until they reached the main auditorium. Harris's breath caught. On the stage stood a group of children, their faces pale and vacant, their eyes glazed as though caught between dream and waking. They swayed in eerie unison, humming the same mechanical lullaby Emily had once carried. Their voices blended into chords that made Harris's skin crawl, notes too perfect, too mathematical to belong to any human choir. And watching over them, clad in a lab coat, was a figure Harris recognized from the files. Dr. Helena Voss, one of Verelia's lead architects. Her hands moved like a conductor, guiding the children's melody. "Stop!" Harris's voice thundered through the hall as his flashlight beam cut across the stage. "Step away from them." The children faltered, their song wavering. Dr. Voss turned slowly, her expression calm, almost serene. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly, as though scolding a guest for arriving too early to dinner. "They're on the brink of something extraordinary. You can't stop it now." Harris advanced, gun trained on her. "They're children, not experiments. Whatever you've done to them, it ends tonight." Voss's lips curled into a faint smile. "Ends? Detective, this is only the beginning. These children are no longer bound by the limitations of the flesh. They are symphonies in motion. And your precious Emily, ah yes, she was meant to be the first violin." At the mention of Emily, Harris's fury surged. "You don't get to say her name." Voss raised a hand, signaling the children. Their humming shifted, rising in pitch until the very air vibrated. The agents around Harris grimaced, clutching their ears, some dropping to one knee as the resonance rattled their skulls. It wasn't just sound. It was weaponized frequency. Harris fought against the dizzying wave, forcing his feet forward. He fired a warning shot into the ceiling. The blast shattered the spell for a heartbeat, and the children's voices faltered again. "Now!" Harris shouted. His team surged forward, tackling Voss to the ground as Harris scrambled onto the stage. He grabbed the nearest child, a boy no older than 10, and shook him gently. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe. Wake up!" The boy blinked, dazed, his humming trailing off into silence. One by one, the agents worked to gather the children, breaking the unnatural harmony. The hall that once rang with haunting chords now filled with sobs and confused murmurs. Dr. Voss struggled against her restraints, her calm veneer finally cracking. "You fools! Do you think you've saved them? Do you think you can undo what has already been written into their bones? The music will never stop. It's bigger than me, bigger than Carter, bigger than all of us." Harris knelt beside her, his voice ice. "Then it will end with me." By dawn, the children were safe, loaded into medical transport vans, their futures uncertain, but no longer trapped in Verelia's grasp. Harris stood outside the concert hall, the first rays of sunlight breaking through the ruins. He felt an exhaustion deeper than bone, but beneath it, a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Weeks later, Harris visited Emily in the hospital. She was sitting up now, color returning to her cheeks, her eyes bright once more. She was humming again, but this time it was different. The melody was soft, human, the kind of tune any child might invent on a lazy afternoon. Sarah sat beside her daughter, smiling through tears as she looked up at Harris. "She's getting better every day. The doctors say the thing inside her is shutting down on its own. They think she'll make a full recovery." Emily looked up at Harris, her small voice carrying more weight than any briefing or file ever could. "Thank you for finding me." Harris swallowed hard, blinking back the sting in his eyes. "You were brave, Emily. Braver than anyone I know." For the first time in months, he felt the heaviness lift. The battle wasn't over. Verelia was still out there, its roots deep and tangled. But Emily was safe. The other children were free. And Michael Carter sat rotting in a cell, his symphony silenced. Sometimes, Harris realized, saving even one child was enough to keep fighting. And so the story closed, not with grand fanfare, but with the quiet sound of a little girl's laughter echoing through a sunlit hospital room. A sound far more powerful than any song Verelia could ever compose. Because in the end, Emily Carter wasn't a vessel for their experiment. She wasn't a project or a subject. She was a child. And now, finally, she was just that again. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life. See you in the next one.